what can we do about the sexual brokenness in the church? Certainly there's a lot going on in culture, but what about among followers of Jesus? I'm Dr. Carol, and thank you for joining me on this episode. We are going to get very explicit about what the problem looks like in the church and what to do about it. But with every conversation like this, it always starts from personal experience. My guest on the program today has her own story, and I will let Ashley share with you her story. But God has called her to be part of an organization that addresses this full time. It's what they do. We're going to be talking about a bit of the statistics around pornography and sexual brokenness, including among Christians, and then what can be done about it. The really beautiful thing is that we don't have to stay stuck. The paradigm Jesus always approaches us with is, come as you are. Just come. But don't stay there. Let's walk together to something better, something more whole. And that's what we're going to address today. My guest, Ashley Jameson, is Associate Director of Women's Groups for Pure Desire. She and her husband went through the Pure Desire process themselves. And now Ashley, for a number of years, has just been passionately helping others with their process. Women, families, couples, particularly in the Christian church. Well, let's not wait any longer. Here's my friend. Ashley Jameson, you and I have kind of been connected for a couple of years now, but we haven't done this here yet. So I'm just glad to have you on the podcast.
Me too. I mean, you bump shoulders with people enough, and I've heard you speak at conferences, and I'm like, really? We haven't connected on the podcast? It just seems like we're closer than we actually are. So
yeah, I'm really thrilled about this. And one of the things that I hope our audience can come to understand about you, those who may don't know you, is that you come to the work you do from a real challenging and painful personal story in your own life, in your marriage, and so on. And isn't that the way God often does these things? He takes what he brings us through and turns that into bread for others, and that's certainly true for you. So what about that?
yeah, absolutely. Around 10 years ago, I discovered that my husband had a history, he had a history with prostitutes. That really rocked my mind because I thought I married the Christian husband who had like a little bit of a colorful past, and he was currently struggling with pornography. And so it devastated me because I personally had my own really rough history with sexual abuse, my own sexual and love addiction, and my own betrayal, also a teen mom of twin boys. And so when I married my husband, I thought, okay, I'm doing it right this time. This is my Christian husband. We're doing the things the way we need to be doing it. We're going to church. And so it devastated me in a way of no matter how right you do it, no matter what you do, people can't be trusted. And, so it was pretty bad. And then we reached out to the church, like I know a lot of people do. I called the women in my church that were older than me, been married decades longer, and said, what do I do? I'm devastated. And I got those painful church answers of, are you reading your Bible enough? Are you praying? Have you forgiven him? And I am telling you, that summer I had read my entire Bible. All I was doing was praying. I was doing everything I could. And so then eventually when I kept hearing those things, I felt like I'm not a good Christian. I don't have enough faith to heal from this, to move a mountain. What's wrong with my faith that I'm still stuck in this pain every day? And then we ended up stumbling across Pure Desire resources for my husband. And that was a total, its own God story of just praying for help. And I was one of those wives that thought, okay, if he gets help, it's your problem, get help, and then we'll be better. I didn't realize how traumatized I actually was and how stuck in trauma, and how his betrayal just made me feel untrusting of the entire world. My bottled up anger and pain I wasn't processing correctly was coming out sideways on my kids in anger. And so it was a few months after he joined a group that I realized I needed something. He kind of pointed it out, which really made me mad. but he was right that you need support, you need support. Um, and so I went to my church and I said, this is a new church to us. It's a great big church, and you have my husband in your group. My name is Ashley. Where are the women? Where are the wives? And he said, we have nobody. We have no group like that. But I've been praying that a wife would step up. So here you go. So I just
Wow.
started leading in my brokenness. I started leading. And within 3 years, I mean, I did it all. I did a lot of things wrong, but my heart was right to invite other women into it, because I was betrayed. And
Yeah.
within 3 years, I had helped start over 25 women's groups for betrayed spouses,
Wow.
addict spouse women, and teens. The youth group is like, hey, come talk to the youth group about what you're doing. And so it just exploded. Our church was like, what? We're talking about this for women? And they kept growing faster than I could keep up.
Wow.
So here I
Yeah.
am. Now I help, I've been at Pure Desire for over 9 years. And my heart is to help people know that wherever you're at, there is a next step. If you can't afford counseling, our big network, including you and all the people we run with, we have something for you that you
Mhm.
don't have to stay stuck there.
Yeah. Wow. You said like 10 volumes worth in just a couple minutes, Ashley. And
I
I
know
do
it's
want to
a lot.
just, I do want to ask about a couple of the things. Um,
Sure.
in just briefly, in saying, you came to your marriage with your own stuff. You mentioned your own sexual trauma and your own sexual past. And before we jump to porn and marriage specifically, can you just unpack a little bit about how that impacted you and the you that you brought to the marriage?
Sure. The you I brought to the marriage. My heart still just feels so like soft and tender for that person. Um, just, you know, okay. So here we go. You go to a church, and here I know you're medical, you have a medical background, and you want the church so bad. As we know from the Barna study, only 10% of churches have something going on. You want them to understand that it's not psychology or clinical or science or the Bible. It is both. And
Yes.
so I grew up thinking, I just need to follow this checklist of Christian things to do. Nobody helped me integrate my sexual brokenness or my sexual curiosity or my sexual trauma with the faith I was hearing in the church. It was stay pure, stay this way, black and white. And so I was so confused just before my marriage in all the things that I did. Um, and so when I went into the marriage, I brought a really low sense of self-worth
Mhm.
and identity, and kind of, I've already made so many sexual mistakes. I should just be happy with the marriage that I have, and and not question anything. And so I was really vulnerable. And then slowly that started to chip away to where I trusted my husband. This is the first
Sure.
man that's ever treated me kindly,
Mhm.
respected me, and then bam, the discovery. And I was
Yes.
like, okay, I'm out. No, nobody in this world is safe. It's just me and Jesus here. So um and going back to that whole clinical or biblical, when I what I realized is you have to go back to figure out, it does all boil down to having a strong identity in Christ. Ultimately, that's what it boils down to. But we need clinical tools to help us figure out why we're stuck, where we're stuck, where along the way did we stop trusting that truth about ourselves and start believing the shame or the lies that were put on us or we put on ourselves. And so it's just so freeing to know that you can do both. You can use both sets of tools, right? So yeah, that's a little bit about
Yeah.
where I was.
Yes. I can imagine that, especially based on your history, when you did find out your husband's sexual behaviors, um, how more deeply can something cut? I
Yeah.
mean, you'd been hurt before and you had dared to come to trust somebody and
Yes.
then just rip it off. And
Yeah.
I would imagine that just destroying of your trust was it certainly impacted your marriage, but it must have impacted other parts of your life too, like your relationship with God and can I trust Him? And that must have
Yeah.
all been mixed up.
I was so at the same time, I was so angry at God and clinging to him. It was like this
Yes.
weird, like nobody in the
Yes.
world can be trusted. I only can trust God. And then, God, I tried to do it right. Why do you
Yes.
keep doing this to me? Like you abandoned me in my, this is how I was feeling. You abandoned me in my childhood. All these bad things happened to me. Had I had the nurturing protection as a child, maybe I would have had a stronger sense of self-worth and identity so that I wouldn't end up in these situations. I felt bad for the little girl. And then also my twins, the ones I had right before I turned 19, they were 5 years old when I got married to John. So this is 15 years later, but when they were 5 years old, I said, I'm never getting married again. And then
Yeah.
I ended up meeting John. And just like you said, I dared to trust. I moved to this small town. And so I just felt so angry and angry at God, angry. I felt like it was a bait and switch. Like,
Yeah.
I was fine as a single mom. Why did you put me in? Why did you lie to me and deceive me? And now my twins are at risk of another divorce. And I would like to say they're 21 now. They love their stepdad. We have worked through so much, and God has been good. But I was very scared and angry.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you have already alluded to you're still married. So when you
Yes.
found out that John had his previous life and then he was not living a clean life, now um, you walked through that devastation, and you're still married.
Mhm.
You've mentioned about recovery groups that he and then you and so on were a part of and involved with still. A bit about what that process was like for you and John to just kind of repair your own ruptured marriage.
Yeah. It was so interesting because before all of this came out, we were 4 years into the marriage when I discovered. And so I had no idea up until that 4 years, um, 4 year mark. And it was so shocking to me because I felt like we had a great sex life. I felt like, we were best friends. And so there was nothing that there was something emotionally off that I kept praying, like, what is that, God? And that kind of helped reveal things. But it was shocking to me because I'm thinking this is the best relationship I've ever had. So it was so confusing. And with my background of kind of, I say, running the streets, like nobody overseeing me, I was just out doing whatever I wanted, getting abused by whoever and abusing myself. And then my husband comes from this really religious, rigid background. His parents are still married. It's my way or the highway. And so what we learned through the process, one, it was really, really hard. About 4 or 5 months into the recovery process, he's in his group, I'm in my healing, group. Um, we got really angry. We were throwing things at each other. We were cussing at each other. And I talked to Dr. Ted, who's the founder of Pure Desire. We were on a trip. And you see, I was still in my recovery while I was working at Pure Desire. And we were sitting in the airport, and I was like, why? I am so angry at him. We've never been like this. We've never cussed at each other. We've never thrown things at each other. We're just like rage out. And he's like, yeah, it's pretty normal, that you guys have been kind of just riding the surface and having your own ways of coping. And now you're really addressing it head on, and emotions are high. John's not using porn. You're addressing, your trust issues and the way that you kind of just emotionally shut down, and you're bringing it forward. And he just encouraged me to keep going. You're allowing yourself to feel the feelings all the way, and it's hard. And so I did keep going. I'm so glad. And that's my encouragement to anybody listening, that when it feels like it's getting hard when you're doing the work, to keep going, because it's
Yeah.
not better to just quit. It's not better to go back. And we had several ups and downs like that. And the good thing is that it doesn't always feel the same. You make progress along the way, even though it's a several year process. You make progress. And so I might say to John, I might have said to him, like, I don't trust you right now, but I am willing to work toward trusting you again as you're working toward your recovery and building trust. And we could have a perfectly, I wouldn't say perfect, but we could have a fun and joyful marriage, knowing that, hey, I don't trust you. Just remember that. And he says, she doesn't trust me. I'm building it back. And we're just really honest about that process. So having support and putting the puzzle pieces
Yeah.
together, it just radically changed our parenting, our relationship. And now we have a a more real expectation of what it looks like to be in a relationship with messy other sinners.
Yes.
And it feels really freeing, like better than before, when I thought everything was rainbows and roses.
Yep. Yep. Well, kind of switching over to the work that you have been doing now for a number of years with Pure Desire, and especially around helping individuals, families, couples get past the hooks of porn. Um, and the study that you collaborated, Pure Desire collaborated on with Barna, that just came
Mhm.
out a few months ago. Not surprising, perhaps, but yet there were still some details there that uh, if I could be shocked, this was there were a couple things that were pretty bad. I think many people now realize that porn is out there, and there's a lot of Christians who struggle with porn, yes, but some of the things that were particularly just striking to me. One is that I think the number was 61% of people who say they're using porn say nobody knows. At least they don't believe anybody knows, that they feel like it's hidden. And I think it was something like 84% said they had nobody helping them
Yes.
with that. That just broke my heart.
Yeah. Yeah. That 84% number was one of, we live in this world. So I wasn't super surprised about the numbers being high, but the number of people, like you said, that nobody knows and they don't feel like anybody is there to help them was shocking, especially us as helpers. If people could just know that they don't have to live in shame and that there is a way out and they know who to go to for help, I feel like that would radically change the way that this whole thing is going in our society. Just knowing, because we don't assume we're going to live life without problems or temptations or struggles, but to not know who to ask for help and to be dealing with that on your own, especially as Christians, we're supposed to be the body and help each other. That number devastates me.
Yes, that was just heartbreaking. Um, in trying to work with those in the body of Christ to help change those numbers, um, there has certainly been a lot more conversations around
Mm-hmm.
sexual brokenness in the body of Christ over the last few years. And Pure Desire's current CEO, I love Nick Stumbo's story about when he was a pastor and he brought this into the light in his church, and it kind
Yeah.
of revolutionized all kinds of things. Um, but what is your just personal feeling about, okay, we've been talking about these things more in the last few years, but there's still such a huge gap. Is it just okay, we're still pushing against a big wall and there's just that big of a difference? Or what do you think is going on there?
Oh, I'm gonna give you, my couple of things that I see. My face is frozen on my eyes rolling, and I'm like, that's perfect because I'm like, oh, why are we still stuck here? Because from the Josh McDowell and Barna report to ours, Pure Desire and Barna, it's only increased by 3%. 7% of churches have help to 10. That's not enough when you see that 75% of men, Christian men, say they use porn, and 40% now of women. It's not enough. And that's not even calculating the betrayed spouses, right? Like,
Yes.
yikes. And so I see that there's a lack of understanding, that so many churches do just feel Jesus can heal everything, which he can. Jesus can heal everything. We just need the Bible and the message, and to pray harder and read more. And so that the inability, or I guess lack of understanding, that people, their brain needs tools as well. Just like if you, I know so many of us have used this example, but just like if somebody came in and they were on drugs with cocaine or heroin, we wouldn't just say read more Bible, pray
Yeah.
more. We would give them the treatment that they need. And that's what confuses people, is pornography addiction does impact our brain like drugs, but because people don't understand that, then they assume that it can be just a mental, spiritual solution. Um, and so the lack of understanding, the lack of wanting to integrate clinical tools or any kind of therapy,
Yeah.
um, The big one is that the majority of pastors themselves are struggling or have struggled. And so they could be still living in their shame. Even if they're sober from their struggles, they could be experiencing that shame. And we know it's not freeing to talk about things when we still have shame around it. And then also, most pastors, they're afraid that if they open this can of worms from the stage, there's not going to be enough support, because a lot of churches, they're always scrounging for volunteers as it is. And so they're saying, we don't want to have a talk about this if we don't have anywhere to send them. And so I think that's where I love what we do with Pure Desire. It's like, you just send the people who come forward to you to us. If you're not ready to handle it as a church, we'll come alongside you, and we're here to support the church. It's one of our favorite things to do. So
Yeah,
those are, I think, bigger issues I see that keep churches from doing something.
sure. You have alluded to, but I want to get real explicit that the paradigm of me and Jesus, okay, Jesus can do anything and heal anything, and he does, but that paradigm of me and Jesus doesn't it's not usually the full way in which God works.
Mm-mm.
That almost always he requires us to connect with others. And I know that is just the rock bottom truth that Pure Desire lives by. You know, the groups, connecting with others. Would you talk a little bit about just where that is so important, and just what Pure Desire is doing, especially in the group thing, which is kind of it's the big piece of what you do, and how
Yeah.
critical that is, that it can't just be me and Jesus.
No, and there's a couple things. Okay, so um from a brain side of things, when when you're talking to somebody and you're like, oh, I just connected those dots as I was telling you. There's something that happens in our brain to connect dots when we say things out loud. And so there has been research to suggest that being able to share painful things, your
Yep.
story, your traumas in a safe group helps you heal. It helps you heal that. And the other part of it is our brain and our memories, our feelings and our memories are stored together. And so when we're able to share that in a safe group, especially repeatedly, our brain is able to file it back away through the filter of today and through our understanding today, and it ends up neutralizing some of those feelings that are attached to those memories. It doesn't mean the memories necessarily go away, but
Yeah.
we're able to talk about it more and more. The other thing is, we see a lot of people get sober because they go to a counselor, a private counselor that nobody knows. They want to stay very anonymous, and they go get sober, but there's still that little thing in their head that says, I'm only accepted with this counselor because I'm paying them. And so the group component, or even what you learn in counseling and taking it to safe people in your life and your family and sharing what you're learning and how you're growing, that we have to share our burdens. We have to confess our sins to one another so that we can break free of that shame that, Satan keeps that little hold of shame. And so we'll see recovered pastors and people say, oh, I haven't, acted out sexually in 10, 20 years, but it wasn't until I went to group or shared my story with my peer group. Maybe it's a pastor's network connection or something where they really feel like that shame is starting to break down. And so just, if we're traumatized along the way, or we've developed a pattern because of our own addiction, whatever side of the coin we're on, we tend to look at things through our own filter and our own experience. And that's why going to group and hearing other people share the same answers through their filter, it's like, oh, this happened to me. I never categorized those sexual things I did when I was 5 years old. I just thought I was a bad, dirty little girl. I heard the lady in my group say this was sexual trauma. And I realized that was a trauma for me too. And I was 5, so just hearing other people helps you make sense of your own story as well sometimes.
Yeah.
There's so many benefits. I mean, SOS, my mom just made a bad comment about my black girl hair again. I need support. Like, just just having that lifeline too.
Yeah. Beautiful. You alluded to, when we were talking a little bit about the Barna data, that 40% of women, Christian women, struggle. Porn is part of their struggle. That some type of sexual brokenness like that. Um, we're starting as a church and as a culture to understand that more. But as a leader of the women's portion of Pure Desire specifically, would you talk a little bit about what you are hearing from women, and where the cutting edge or the struggles are, especially for Christian women in addressing some of this sexual brokenness, pornography part of their life?
Yeah, I mean, it is like any industry that's a money making industry. The men have been riding steadily, 70-ish%. And so why not tap into this untapped market of women and target them and children and all of that. And so um I'm seeing women get into it through social media, through movies, those racy TV series that are romantic and they are basically just pornography with romantic stories weaved in and out. Um, but the trouble is also our churches are primarily led by men. Most churches have male pastors, and so there's hindrance number one. Not saying it's bad that a man's leading a church. Let's don't hear me say that. But if I'm a woman struggling with pornography in the church, and let's say it's a smaller church where there's a pastor and a secretary, I mean, so there's that stumbling block of who do I go to that feels safe like a woman? Okay, well now who do I go to that's not a betrayed spouse leader in the church, but she is going to understand a sexual struggle, because we believe as women that it's more of a man's struggle, because that's how it's been. The little bit of help out there often is geared toward the men's struggle, the women are betrayed. And so that puts another obstacle in front of the woman. Some of the women that join my group, they just don't identify as women who struggle with love or sex addiction. So if you give, I mean, from the medical field, if you don't say, hey, if you have the flu or whatever, come to me, but you say, hey, if you're feeling nauseous, if you have a fever, that's how they come to you. And so saying, if you find yourself in failed relationship after failed relationship, if you find yourself preoccupied with fantasy, if you find yourself um, dreading having sex with your husband, like these are the statements we're able to make to get women to step forward to join our groups and to make those connections, because we don't really, women's issues can be so nuanced
Yeah.
and not always just porn, um, that it can be confusing that they're struggling with anything love or sex. And so just making sure that we cast a very wide net and say anywhere on the sexual spectrum, whether it's sexual anorexia and you're not interested at all, or
Yeah.
sexual acting out, we want to help you get to the core of it and figure out what kind of intimacy disorder really is going on, there with your sexual health.
Yeah. I was just, as we're recording this, I was talking with a woman last evening about this very thing. And she's been through sexual trauma and she's having sexual struggles now, even though she is married. And she both is struggling to really connect with her husband sexually. And she has her own stuff on the side that she knows isn't good.
Yeah.
And it's just a big mess. I'm saying that because there's all kinds of women out there that are struggling
Yes.
in those ways. And we need to be talking about how women are struggling and processing this also. And I'm so glad you're doing that.
Yeah, and I try as gently as I can. Once women are past that initial phase of betrayal trauma, because that needs to be addressed right away,
Yes, yes,
then a lot of times they're hanging around and I'm like, hey, what next? Do we want to work on the fact that you've been married for 40 years and haven't ever orgasmed with your husband? Or do we want to work on the fact that you fantasize about a different scenario in order to connect with your husband during, like, there's so many layers
yeah,
that we don't realize keep us sexually distant or
yeah,
shut down or whatever it is, and we can just let it go on. Like I can't, I mean, I can't tell you how many women have told me I just go somewhere else in my head, or and I'm
mhm,
like, that's
mhm.
there's so much more. We should work on getting in there and trying to heal that for you and also thrive in that area
Yeah.
if that's what they're wanting.
Yes, I think that's what God wants for
Yeah.
us as individuals, as children of God. And I love how you are so clear that this isn't about a checklist of behaviors, what's right or wrong. Accountability is important, but
Yeah.
if by accountability you only mean did you mess up last week or not, you got to get a whole lot deeper than that. We've got to get under the surface and deal with these matters of the heart.
Absolutely. If I had heard one woman maybe even a man, but definitely a woman. In all those years I was struggling from the, age of 14 to 24 when I got married to John, I know I would have at least started exploring and saying, what is this? Because it wasn't until my husband got in group and I was watching one of the videos that was part of his group that I said, the dots all started clicking. Like, my family has a medical background. That's more my, before Pure Desire, that's what I knew. And it all started making sense. It was like everything my Christian community had told me about God and the scriptures started to click. Like, when
Wow.
I understood the body, the brain, that this was a pattern that could be changed. When I started learning about neuroplasticity, I was like, okay, now I have a visual of how my body is actually reacting to what God said in the Bible. And I know that even though it feels hard, change is possible. And so I need to just keep moving forward with the change. And that's why I'm like, your podcast and the books you write and what we do at Pure Desire, if I could just wish anything, it would be that people know exactly where to go to get help as soon as they identify that they're struggling. From there, we can figure it out. We have a whole team, we have people, we have resources, but just that they would know where to go in a Christian community.
Yeah. Yeah. One more area I just want to highlight for a bit. I know you also have a passion for families and kids. And kids now can be exposed to porn so early. Their friend on the school bus, even if they don't have a
Yeah.
smartphone,
Yep.
their third grade buddy sitting next to them on the school bus can show, So there's so many possible ways there. And I know a lot of parents may feel a lot of anxiety and fear in addressing these topics with their children, but they don't want them to have some of the struggles that many Christian parents will understand are going to come if their kids
Mm-hmm.
have early exposure to porn. Talk for a minute about how parents can appropriately think about this topic and help prepare their kids for life, frankly.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely feel strongly about this considering I was a teen mom myself.
Yes.
And I have the twin boys that are 21. My daughter's 15 on Saturday, and then my little guy's 13. So we are like real life material here with all the things. And so I have a couple things. If you as a parent have had, I shouldn't even say have had sexual struggles. If you have not done any kind of work to process through your own view of your own sexuality, regardless of if you think you struggle or not, do that, because you have to be able to talk about your own sexual narrative and your view on sexuality and get and sift through any shame you have surrounding it before you can help your kids. And I saw that even in my husband a few weeks ago, like, I think you still have some shame around this area, and I can see it coming out as you're talking to the kids. So there's something here we need to dig into. Benefits for him being married to somebody like me, or consequences, I don't know, however he sees it. So you have to do your own work first so you can understand. Um, if talking about sex embarrasses you, join the club. Like, I do this every day, all day long. And sometimes when the kids ask me something or I realize I need to have a conversation with them, it still makes me blush. Do it anyways. And I would say make it a culture in your house. It's not okay, my daughter's 13, my son's 13, so we're going to sit down and have the talk. Start talking to them about sexuality, about their body parts, I say make sure to tell them things that happened at your age. So when I experienced sexual trauma with other kids in our curiosity around 9 years old, when my daughter hit 9 years old, I told her, hey, when I was 9 years old, this is kind of what happened to me. I just want you to know, if that ever happens to you, you can tell me. It was next week she told me that the girls tried to get her to do something sexual. Church girls on a Sunday, bright sunny afternoon in the bedroom playing. So I like, that was a perfect example. So tell them what happened at your age, let them know that you're safe to talk to. And then just make sure to continue to be a safe place. So if they come home from school and say, you know what so and so did, they may be testing your response. And so
Yep.
make sure that you're still responding in a gracious, loving way, even if you're giving their opinion. And don't assume that your kids are not exposed, even if they're super homeschooled, super sheltered, because I have a new book coming out for moms and daughters, and I interviewed 5 14-year-old girls, 14 to 15-year-old girls. 2 of them are very sheltered protected from the world, I'm quoting, no phones, homeschooled, Christian homes. And all 5 girls answered the interview questions almost exactly the same. Their struggles with pornography, their exposures, how they got exposed, like you said, might be different. Somebody else may have showed them, they stumbled across. And so don't be afraid. Parents say, I'm afraid I'll introduce it. I'll put ideas. I don't know if they've experienced that or they know about that yet. It's okay for you to be the first one to expose them to something, because then you automatically become the expert in their eyes. So just lots of any open door. Say, this is an open door for me to say something because it finds them. I found porn under the bridge walking home from swimming lessons. That is not how kids find it anymore. It just lands in their lap. It pops up on their screen. It pops up on the bus. It's on TV. It's on the billboards. I mean, everything. So just as much as you can, be talking to them about it.
That's good, Ashley. And so important, because there isn't anybody who's going to come to adulthood without being faced with this stuff in some or many forms. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. And we do have, I want to say, we put out a resource called the Youth Leader Library at Pure Desire. It's for pastors and youth leaders, but it's a gem for parents too. And it's free. There's tons of 3 to 5 minute videos. So what do I do if my student told me they're struggling with porn? A parent could watch that. And so go on our website and, equip yourself so that you're prepared ahead of time and you're not stuck in shock, because if you respond in shock, they're going to take that and interpret it in their own way. So be prepared that your kids will experience something and you need to respond.
Yep. We have alluded to a number of different resources, and let's just get explicit here as we kind of round the last mile. We've mentioned the study that Pure Desire and Barna collaborated on about the state of pornography. I'm even blocking on the formal name of the published study, but there is a wealth of data. If this is something that you are interested in personally, or as a leader in the church, a small group leader, a pastor, whatever, this is it's rich and full with things you need to know. So maybe you can just comment on that specifically, Ashley, and then some of what people can find at puredesire.org.
Yes. Okay. So Beyond the Porn Phenomenon is the study. You can find that on our website. We have a parent training course, a 10-week course that you can do with your church small group or just at home. We have the Youth Leader Library that I talked about. We have about over 100 online groups running, different types of online groups. So if you're a man or a woman that struggles, if you're experiencing betrayal, find a group. We also have a map where you can plug in your zip code and find the nearest group to you, one that's run out of a church. We have about 20 clinicians. So if you need counseling, we have a free consultation button on there. Lots of things. So I just want to encourage you, if you're not even sure and you just need to reach out and say, hey, here's my situation, where do I start? We'd be happy to point you in the right direction. And like I said, if it's not us, we will point you in some direction, because we know other people that run in this field. So
we are going to have those links in the show notes if you're listening, under this video if you're watching. Pure Desire has a strong track record over like 4 decades now, I think, something like that. And you've been around for 9 years. There's some solidness here.
Yeah. And we have such a big heart for what we do. Almost everybody on staff has their own story. So we come from a place of, we get it, we've been there, and we are so glad that you reached out. So don't hesitate to reach out for anything.
This has been delightful and encouraging, even though the subject is a hard one. Ashley, you have just talked about it in a way that gives so much light and hope, which is, I believe, what Jesus is all about. And I have to thank you for that.
Thank you. It's been so good to it's an honor to be invited on your podcast. I was really excited, and you're just so easy to talk to. And I feel very grateful to be here today, sharing just another angle, another ministry, another set of resources with your listeners.
Well, many, many blessings to you. And you and I are going to stay in touch for sure. And I know our listeners are going to find this helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
If anything that we have talked about tweaks something in you, pulls something in you, let me encourage you to check the links. We have the link to the Beyond the Porn Problem, the study that Pure Desire and Barna co-facilitated, and also to Pure Desire's website and resources. There is a lot there. Maybe you would be one to facilitate a Pure Desire group at your church, or at least join one of their online groups. Just so much good stuff there for you if you are struggling with porn, if you are a betrayed partner, if you are a parent or church leader who wants to help those within your sphere of influence, under your care, to address these problems. And then I also want to let you know about our latest resource at Dr. Carol Ministries, our Sexpectations online video digital course. This is not particularly looking at behaviors. This is looking at the matters of the heart underneath whatever your sexual issues are. You didn't wake up one day and decide to have sexual issues, but something has been going on in your heart underneath those issues. And this online Sexpectations course helps you look at that with honesty and compassion. And most importantly, invite Jesus right into the middle of it. There are experiences inside this online course that help you experience Jesus coming right into the middle of your story. And that's when things change. So check that link under this video also. I would encourage you to make sure you're subscribed. If you're not already, just click the subscribe button so that you get notice of the new material we put up, usually every week. And then tell somebody else about Relationship Prescriptions, about this channel, and that would be a gift to you and to them and to us. If you'd like to leave me a message, I read every one. You can leave a message under this video, or you can use the contact page on our website, drcarolministries.com, to send me a confidential message, and I would love to hear from you. And until next time, may God bless you.